Good evening. Malcolm X said, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent because they control the minds of the masses. Uncomfortable or not, this sentiment seems to have permeated our discourse, aided by mistakes we make on television and across newspaper sheets, and even confirmation of the influence of backroom machinations. The people ask, who is telling the truth? The air is heavy with the threats of banning and the dangerous personal targeting of journalists. This is a time, it would seem, of distrust and an ever-growing question. Does the media have an agenda? It is Thursday and I am Madam Speaker. Our panel from the South African National Editors Forum, Executive Director Kate Skinner, from the EFF Mandisa Mashego, the party's Gauteng Chair, and to my right, the members of our jury, William Bird, Media Monitoring Director, Juanita Hunter, political journalist at the Sunday Times, Thabo Magwenyane, a brand specialist, and Lehlohonolo Maile, a citizen. I think I've described you aptly. Yep. I'm expecting robust contributions from all of our guests tonight, and they know the rules not to keep things too long. Let's kick things off with you, Kate. How would you describe the quality of journalism in South Africa today?
I would say it's varied. I would say we have some absolutely outstanding journalists that have done absolutely incredible work. If we look at like the Gupta leaks, but also other stories. I'm just thinking about some of the amazing work that's been done on the National Lotteries Commission by Ground Up. But then I'd also say that obviously that we make mistakes.
And what comes to mind? You gave us examples of good journalism. Examples of bad journalism,
well,
Kate?
Definitely. I mean, some of the Sunday Times journalism has been very poor. We've also seen a lot of mistakes made also on our public broadcaster. I mean, I think that there are a lot of places where we could definitely improve. There's no doubt that we have to do some introspection and look at things which we could do better.
And I hope that tonight we are going to have that level of honest conversation. Mandisa Mashego, what is your beef with the media?
Well, I'm here. And we had threatened not to talk to you again. So I think we have a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
And you can't deny the history and current reality of South Africa, which is impacted on by our history, which is just stubbornly refusing to go away. The media is not transforming enough. But more than anything else, the media has no watchdog, essentially. So journalists, under the directorship of their editors, producers, and executive producers, and of course, directed by the owners, behind the scenes, basically get given mandates which they have no choice but to follow through. As a result, they don't really focus on publishing or broadcasting the absolute truth or balanced news.
Okay, so let's focus then on the watchdog. SANEF is supposed to be the watchdog, some would say, but it's made up of editors. And you can't be referee and you can't be player.
I think we've got a number of watchdogs. I mean, so I would disagree. I mean, we've got the Press Council, we've got the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa, we've got the regulator, ICASA. SANEF as well has got a whole lot of principles around ethical journalism. So I think we've got a number of watchdogs, and I think the problem is that we don't publicize those watchdogs enough.
So educate us, for people who are watching who think, number one, I didn't even know the Press Council exists. I'm saying out there, of course, I do.
Yeah.
That we have more bodies than just SANEF. Where are the areas where they've actually done their work? Where have they corrected what has been incorrectly done?
So I mean, the Press Council, for instance, has done some fantastic work. So around, for instance, the stuff around the Sunday Times. In fact, they were the ones that came out and said, look, there are problems. And in fact, the Sunday Times came out with a whole lot of apologies. And in fact, it was the Press Council that actually picked up, where people took the complaint to in the first place. The Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa has many complaints and is constantly actually probably publicizing itself, maybe more than the Press Council. So I think that those bodies do exist.
Okay, so aside from outing, I mean, what substantively is done to hold the media in check? And here's why I asked the question. SANEF said it would launch a probe into the whole saga. We're talking about the Sunday Times here. And I don't mean to only focus on the Sunday Times, but it's the most recent case in point that I think a lot of people can immediately relate to. You said you would launch a probe. And you would investigate.
And we are.
So tell me where we are with that and how you actually go about doing that.
Okay, so we are going to, and that is basically going to happen next year. And we're going to have a retired judge. We're going to have two people who were part of the media but are no longer part of the media because we feel that there needs to be some kind of distance. And what we're going to look at is ethics, credibility, and specifically the issue of capture of journalists. Capture by the state and capture by corporate interests.
How big a deal and a factor is that? I mean, how endemic is that?
Well, people have claimed, for instance, that that particular journalists have been captured. Journalists in the independent group, journalists, for instance, also, for instance, a publication like the Mail and Guardian, publications, like the Sunday Times. So, I mean, I think across it, there have been accusations that particular journalists have been captured. And so we've said, we as an industry-linked body, we believe that we need to look at this issue. And so we will put this commission together. It will sit for 6 months. It will look in depth at the issues.
Mandisa, does that satisfy you?
You know, I think the reason I stated that we don't have, take the press ombudsman, for instance, and the council that she's talking about. Very few people know about them. They're regulating themselves. It's themselves playing the game and themselves being the referees. But the biggest issue for us is not about the ego battles between us as political organizations and the media. It's not about that. It's about what is the agenda of the media really with this kind of conduct.
What makes you think there's an agenda?
Yeah, there's an agenda. You can't not have an agenda. In a country where the media is concentrated in a few hands, in a country where the media is concentrated in the ownership of a few hands that are white, the black players in the media space are very, very sort of almost minuscule, without using a terrible word that sounds derogatory, but their influence is not much.
On that point, though, Kate is shaking her head. I'm going to come back to you. You're shaking your head.
No, because I mean, I think if you so the biggest media operation in the country is the SABC, and that is owned actually by the minister is the sole shareholder, and the people of South Africa basically are the owners of the SABC.
So is this an exaggerated position that
absolutely an exaggerated position.
Mandisa?
Then if we look at the independent group, I mean, the PIC owns it. I mean, if you look at it, and if you look at the entire community media sector, I mean, most of it is owned by, not as the FF often claims, white monopoly.
Okay, let me turn it back to Mandisa.
On the broadcast side, it's a fact that, of course, the state, in fact, correctly so, the state should own the public broadcaster. And of course, I mean, in fact, we would be in a massive crisis if we didn't have the SABC right now, because where would black audiences be getting at least some kind of course, we know there'll be state interference, there'll be some kind of interference from political parties, etc. But thank goodness that we have that little bit to hold on to at least express who we are as Africans, not only our stories, but news, information, entertainment, etc. The problem with the media is that, put the state aside, everything else is owned by white people, and white men in particular. Even if you can take Ferriel and whoever else who happens to be preferring to refer to themselves as black and make them editors.
Are they not black editors?
But they take their directives from above. They take their directives from above. They are not
what
interested.
Makes you believe that?
Let me tell you why.
What makes you believe
that?
Let
me give you an example. Right now I come from a place called Everton, which is over 104 years old. Everton has got 14 wards with a population of over 300,000 people. It has one police station. It has one clinic. It has no roads, no electricity. Women are subjected to thuggery every morning when they wake up and go to taxi ranks. Have you ever heard anybody make an issue out of it?
There's a difference between the choice of stories covered and your direct link between interference, shareholder interests, informing the decisions that an editor will make in a newsroom. That they're different, but what you're saying is serious when it comes to editors.
Let me tell you why I'm saying that. The agenda of the white-owned and white-controlled media, right, which is a capitalist interest, but also a racially defined capitalist interest, is not just a capitalist interest to advance the interest of black capitalists. No. It's a racially defined, and it's controlled by white supremacist mentality, white supremacist but control
still,
obsession.
Here's the issue. Proof, the straight line evidence that editors are influenced.
I'm coming to that. If a black editor genuinely had control and authority, real authority, to decide what must be published, what must be broadcast, the producer, etc. I can tell you now, as a black person, they would prefer to broadcast or to choose and authorize the stories that affect the lives of their own people. But if they are handled from somewhere else, They are going to ignore Everton and the almost 500,000 people of Everton who have lived in dire poverty for 104 years, and both ANC and white capitalist interests
so
have
just
no interest
in the rebuttal that you gave, I'm not entirely sure that I'm convinced of that straight line evidence, but it's a point that we can explore a little bit further.
That's fine.
We will hear from our jury when we return. This is Madam Speaker.